Maya, honey, we are so sorry about the science fair. There was a last minute schedule change with Chloe's nationals, and my mother's voice, tinny and laced with that familiar hollow guilt, crackled through the phone. I cut her off, my own voice, a stranger to me, as cold and sharp as fractured glass. Save it. I'm emancipating myself legally. The line went dead silent, the only sound the hum of the vast, empty auditorium around me. The shock wasn't just on her end of the line. It was a jolt through my own system, a declaration I hadn't known I was ready to make until the words were already out, hanging in the air like a death sentence to the life I used to lead. I lowered the phone, my gaze drifting to the cheap, gold-plated trophy I'd placed on an empty seat in the front row. First place, Riverside County Regional Science Fair. Through the tall window at the back of the hall, the red taillights of my parents' car were a fading smear in the rain, already halfway to the airport. Halfway to Chloe. Again. The familiar metallic tang of disappointment was there, but beneath it was something new, something forged in the fire of a life I'd already lived once. This time, the hurt wasn't a wound. It was a weapon. The decision was made. They had 18 hours before they were scheduled to return, expecting their quiet, understanding daughter. They were about to meet someone else entirely. This wasn't just a teenage tantrum fueled by a single missed event. It was a strategic move informed by a memory so vivid, it felt like it happened yesterday. I could still feel the phantom weight of the Nobel Prize medal on my chest, the roar of the crowd in Stockholm. I could still see the two empty seats in the front row where my parents should have been. A void that a lifetime of achievement could never fill. They missed that too. In that life, I had swallowed the hurt and waited decades for a recognition that never came from them. I would not make that mistake again. This time, I wasn't just aiming for a trophy, I was building an empire they couldn't ignore, and I was laying the first brick right now. My phone buzzed again. A text. The follow-up apology, no doubt. The digital equivalent of a pat on the head. In my first life, I would have clutched it like a lifeline. This time, my thumb swiped left and the notification vanished into the ether, unread. It was a small act, but it felt like severing a chain. The first decisive action of my new life, taken within minutes of their departure. The old Maya was gone, deleted along with their empty words. My path was clear, a series of calculations I'd been running in my head for what felt like an eternity. A janitor's keys jangled down the hall, the sound echoing in the silence, a signal that my time here was up. I shoved my phone into my pocket and pulled my worn research notebooks from my backpack. The pages were filled with equations and schematics far beyond anything a 17-year-old should know. The foundational work for the very discoveries that had won me the Nobel. They thought they were driving to see a champion. They had no idea they had just left one behind, armed with a future they couldn't possibly imagine. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the makeshift lab in my bedroom. At 8 a.m. sharp, I dialed. The air was still and cool, charged with the ozone smell of my equipment and the silent thrum of my own resolve. After 2 rings, a polite, professional voice answered, "MIT Office of Early Admission, how can I help you?" I kept my own voice steady, draining it of all emotion, making it a pure instrument of my will. "Hello, my name is Maya Chen. I'm calling to formally withdraw my early admission application." There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "Maya Chen. Yes, I have your file right here. Miss Chen, your application is exceptionally strong. May I ask the reason for your withdrawal?" I looked at the schematics for a compact fusion reactor taped to my wall, plans that I knew, with absolute certainty, would change the world. "I've decided to pursue a different research track," I said calmly. "My focus has shifted. I will be applying to Stanford instead. Could you be so kind as to connect me to their quantum physics department?" I seemed to have misplaced their direct line. The stunned silence on the other end was more satisfying than any trophy. My phone rang less than a minute after I hung up. I knew it would be her. I let it ring twice before answering, just to let the silence stretch. "Maya, honey, we're so sorry." Mom's voice was frantic, a stark contrast to her hollow apology the night before. This was real panic. "I meant what I said last night," I stated, cutting through her planned speech. There was a sharp intake of breath. Don't be ridiculous, Maya. You can't just emancipate yourself. You're 17. We were just shocked. Let's talk about this when we get home. We can go out for a nice dinner. We can celebrate your award properly. No, I said. The word was a slammed door. We're past that. I have a practical question for you. It's about my college fund, the one Grandpa set up for me. What about it? Her voice was wary now, the false warmth gone. I just need the account details. I'll need to have the funds transferred to a new account that I'll be controlling. You can't do that. You're not of legal age, she snapped back, her fear turning to anger. The court can authorize it as part of the emancipation proceedings. So I'll need the account number and the current balance, please. Maya, this has gone far enough, she exclaimed. This is not something we discuss over the phone. Then I guess I'll just have my lawyer subpoena the bank records, I said, the lie tasting like power. But I thought I'd give you the chance to be honest with me first, for old time's sake. What is the current balance in my college fund, Mom? The silence that followed was heavy with everything she wasn't saying. I could hear my dad murmuring frantically in the background, but I kept my focus on her. Mom, I pressed, just tell me the number. Her voice, when it finally came, was a choked whisper. There's nothing in it, Maya. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow, a wave of ice water that seemed to stop my heart. Even though a part of me, the part that had lived this all before, knew it was coming, hearing the admission out loud was different. It was the final, irrefutable data point in a lifetime of experiments in neglect. Nothing, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. What happened to the $250,000 my grandfather left me? It was for your future, she stammered, and we invested it in a future, in Chloe's future. Her cheerleading, the coaching, the travel for nationals. It's elite, Maya. It costs a fortune. We were going to pay it all back. You were going to pay it back? I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. You stole my legacy to fund her hobby, and you were going to pay it back with what? You can't even keep the lights on without my science fair prize money. It is not a hobby, she shrieked, all pretense gone. It is her dream, and she needed our support. You've always had your books, your projects. You never needed us in the same way. So you took my future and gave it to her, I said, the ice in my veins turning to steel. Thank you. That's the most honest thing you've said to me in years. I ended the call before she could reply, plunging the room back into silence. The truth hadn't set me free. It had simply confirmed that my cage was even smaller and more treacherous than I had thought. My grief lasted for precisely 90 seconds. Then, the cold, calculating part of my brain, the part that saw the world as a series of problems waiting to be solved, took over completely. The board was set. The players were revealed. Now it was time to move my pieces. With a new, chilling efficiency, I got to work. My first call was to the most ruthless family lawyer in the city, scheduling an emergency consultation for the next morning. My second was an email directly to the dean of admissions at Stanford with a one-line subject. Fusion research proposal from a prospective undergraduate. My third and final action was a call to the local news station's investigative reporter, the one who loved taking down powerful people. I have a story for you, I'd said. It's about a local science prodigy, academic fraud, and what happens when a family values pom-poms more than physics. I had appointments scheduled for the lawyer at 9, Stanford at 11, and the news station at 2. 23 hours remained until my parents walked through the front door. They had no idea they were walking into a war I had already won. The air in the Riverside Prep physics lab was thick with the scent of ozone and old textbooks. It was Saturday afternoon, the school deserted, which made the hum of the capacitor bank I was calibrating seem deafeningly loud. Across the lab bench, Professor Williams watched me, his arms crossed, a deep furrow in his brow. He was the only teacher who had ever truly challenged me, a man whose respect I'd had to earn with proofs and principles, not just good grades. Calling him in on a weekend was a bold move, but he'd come, his curiosity overriding his skepticism. Okay, Maya, I'm here, he said, his voice echoing slightly in the large room. You said you had something to show me that couldn't wait until Monday. You also said it would be paradigm shifting. That's a heavy word for a high school lab. I gave him a small, confident smile and tightened a final clamp on the vacuum chamber at the heart of my device. It was a Frankenstein's monster of salvaged parts and custom wound electromagnets, all wired to my laptop. Paradigm shifting is relative, Professor, I replied. For a 17-year-old in a prep school lab, achieving net positive energy from a contained fusion reaction is, I'd argue, exactly that. His eyebrows shot up. Fusion? Maya, that's not possible, not here, not with this equipment. Most of the world's greatest discoveries were made with equipment others deemed insufficient, I countered, positioning my phone on a small tripod. I opened my Instagram app and hit the Go Live button. The viewer count began to tick up slowly. 1, 5, 20, 50. What are you doing? Professor Williams asked, his gaze fixed on my phone. Documenting my work, creating a public record of the experiment, I explained, looking directly into the camera. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maya Chen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a senior here at Riverside Prep, and for the last several years, I've been working on a problem. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. The problem of clean, limitless energy. Today, I'm going to demonstrate my prototype for a compact, sustainable fusion reactor. Professor Williams stared, his expression a mixture of alarm and utter fascination. The viewer count climbed past 200. I turned my attention back to my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard, initiating the pre-power sequence. The magnetic field is stabilizing, I narrated for both the professor and my online audience. I'm introducing the deuterium-tritium gas into the vacuum chamber, powering the primary coils now. A low hum vibrated through the floor, growing in intensity. A soft blue light began to glow from within the chamber's small viewing port, pulsing like a captured star. Look at your monitors, Professor, I urged. He tore his eyes from the reactor and stared at the screen displaying the energy input versus output. His jaw went slack. The output graph was climbing, steadily rising past the break-even point. We were generating more power than we were putting in. My God, he whispered, leaning closer to the screen. It's working. Maya, how is this possible? Just as the output curve peaked, my phone, still broadcasting live, began to ring. The screen flashed with a picture of my father. I let it ring twice, the sound an unwelcome intrusion into my moment of triumph. Then I answered it, putting it on speaker for all to hear. Hi, Dad. Maya, what in God's name do you think you're doing? His panicked voice, strained and furious, filled the lab. Your mother told me what you said. Now I'm getting calls from the school board. They're saying you're live streaming from the physics lab? Turn that camera off right now. I glanced at the glowing reactor, then back at my phone. I'm a little busy right now, Dad. I'm in the middle of a controlled nuclear fusion reaction, but I'm sure your phone call is more important. Don't you dare be sarcastic with me. This is family business. You can't just announce our family business to strangers, he roared. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. My live audience was now over 1,000. Watch me, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Or don't, you're good at that. That is it. You are grounded until you're 30, he yelled, his voice crackling with static and rage. This isn't some teenage tantrum, Maya. No, it's not, I agreed, my eyes fixed on the stable, beautiful blue glow of my reactor. It's a calculated decision based on 17 years of empirical data. The data shows a consistent pattern of neglect, financial malfeasance, and emotional abandonment. My actions are a logical response to that data. Professor Williams was staring at me, his awe for my experiment now compounded by the sheer audacity of my confrontation. You're being dramatic, Dad shouted, his desperation palpable. I'm being strategic, I corrected him. For example, I know you and Mom took my entire college fund, $250,000, and spent it on Chloe's cheerleading career. A fact I now have on a recorded line, by the way, and now it seems on a live stream for the whole world to see. The silence on his end was absolute. He had no countermove. I had laid the facts bare, not with anger, but with the dispassionate precision of a scientist stating a law of nature. You want to talk about family business, Dad? Let's talk about the fact that my hobby, as you've always called it, just solved the global energy crisis in a high school physics lab. I wonder what the venture capitalists will have to say about that. I wonder if it's worth more than a set of pom-poms. Maya, you don't know what you're doing, he stammered, his voice finally breaking. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied. I have to go now. My future is calling, and I've decided to finally answer. I hung up, severing the connection. The sudden, cold silence from the phone was a stark and jarring contrast to the warm, steady hum of the fusion reactor. The blue light pulsed softly, a tiny man-made star full of promise and power. It was the sound of my real-life beginning, a life I was building for myself, by myself. I looked up at Professor Williams. The shock on his face had been replaced by a look of profound, unadulterated respect. He wasn't just looking at his student anymore. He was looking at the future. The moment I hung up on my father, the physics lab seemed to shrink, the world outside its walls rushing in through the tiny lens of my phone's camera. The live stream's viewer count wasn't climbing anymore. It was exploding, numbers spinning like a slot machine hitting a jackpot. 5,000, 10,000, 50. Comments flooded the screen in an unreadable waterfall of text. Professor Williams, pale and clutching the edge of a lab bench for support, pointed a trembling finger at my laptop. Maya, he breathed, his voice filled with a reverence I had never heard from him before. The university servers, they're flagging me. I'm getting automated alerts from Caltech, MIT, CERN. They're all pinging the network address of this lab. They're watching. Let them watch, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with fear, but with exhilaration. This was it, the point of no return. I had ignited the flame, and now the world was turning to see the light. I unmuted the phone's microphone. As you can see, I said, my voice resonating with newfound authority. The reaction is stable and self-sustaining. The net energy output is currently 4.2 megawatts, all from a device built with less than $5,000 worth of salvaged equipment and a few components I milled myself in the school's machine shop. They think it's a hoax, Professor Williams murmured, reading from the live chat. They're demanding peer review. They're saying the energy readings are faked. Before I could respond, my phone began ringing again, overriding the live stream app. It was a Palo Alto number I didn't recognize. A part of me expected it to be my mother, ready for a second round. I gestured for the professor to stay quiet and answered, my voice crisp and professional. Maya Chen speaking. Miss Chen, this is Dr. Eris Thorne, Dean of Physics at Stanford University. The voice was deep, resonant, and utterly serious. I apologize for the unsolicited call. A colleague sent me a link to your broadcast. I have to ask, is what I'm seeing authentic? I leaned against the lab bench, suddenly aware of how tired I was. Good afternoon, Dean Thorne. It's as authentic as the laws of thermodynamics. The data from the last 15 minutes of operation is currently being uploaded to a public server. You can find the link in my Instagram bio. I believe you'll find the spectral analysis of the plasma containment particularly illuminating. There was a moment of silence, filled with the distant sound of furious typing. Professor Williams was mouthing Stanford Dean? At me, his eyes wider than I'd ever seen them. I see the data packet, the dean said, his tone shifting from skepticism to raw excitement. Miss Chen, Maya, your modulation of the magnetic resonance, it's revolutionary. It bypasses the primary obstacles to stable ignition that teams with billion-dollar budgets have been wrestling with for decades. How did you solve the plasma instability issue? I stopped treating it as a flaw in the containment field and started treating it as a predictable waveform, I said simply. I learned to ride the wave instead of trying to flatten the ocean. It's all in my paper, which I'll be publishing shortly. Forget the paper, he almost shouted, his academic composure cracking. We want you, here at Stanford. Your application withdrawal from MIT has already been noted. I am prepared to offer you a full presidential scholarship, a research grant of $250,000 to replicate your work here, and personal mentorship with our entire quantum physics faculty. We can have a jet pick you up tomorrow. Just name the time. The offer hung in the air, so immense and immediate, it felt like a physical force. The scholarship, the grant, the jet. It was everything I had fought for in my last life. A victory that had taken me 20 years to achieve, now handed to me in a 30-second phone call. For a moment, the room seemed to tilt, the hum of the reactor fading into a distant buzz. The fluorescent lights of the lab dissolved, replaced by the warm, golden glow of crystal chandeliers. The cheap fabric of my high school jacket melted away, replaced by the heavy, bespoke silk of a Nobel ceremony gown. The weight on my chest wasn't the phantom pressure of anxiety, but the solid, cool reality of the gold medal. I was on the stage in Stockholm again, the applause of the world's greatest minds a roaring sea around me. I smiled, a genuine, deep smile of accomplishment, and my eyes scanned the front row, the place of honor, searching for the two faces I had always longed to see in that moment of ultimate triumph. And just like before, the seats were empty. The space where my parents should have been was a black hole, a void that no amount of applause or prestige could ever fill. The sudden, crushing realization hit me with the force of a physical impact. Winning wasn't enough. The victory was hollow if the people you wanted to see it most weren't there. The pain of it was so sharp, so unexpectedly potent, that my breath caught in my throat, the golden hall dissolving back into the drab, familiar cinder block of the physics lab. The ghost of a future I was desperately trying to rewrite had come to warn me. Maya? Professor Williams' voice cut through the memory, grounding me. Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost. I blinked, the image of the empty chairs receding but not disappearing. It would always be there, a part of my personal calculus. I'm fine, I said, my voice harder than before. The pain was real, but it was a luxury I couldn't afford. Sentiment was a vulnerability. I had to push it down. Dean Thorne, I appreciate the generous offer. I spoke into the phone, my tone all business now. A jet is dramatic. I have some legal and familial matters to attend to here first, but let's keep in touch. You have my number. I ended the call, my hand moving with a will of its own. Professor Williams looked at me bewildered. You just hung up on the Dean of Stanford after he offered you the world. He'll call back, I said, turning my attention to the notifications flooding my screen. His offer is on the table. It's my baseline. Now, it's time for the bidding to begin. I scrolled through the direct messages on Instagram. They were from names I recognized from my past life. The titans of tech and venture capital, Helios Ventures. Quantum Leap Capital, Odyssey Innovations, all with the same message. Urgent. Call us. We saw the stream. We want to invest. This is too much, too fast, Professor Williams warned, running a hand through his thinning hair. These people are sharks, Maya. They will eat you alive if you're not careful. You need a patent lawyer, an agent, a team. A team takes time, I countered, the cold calculation returning. Time I don't have. In the next 24 hours, the story will be teenage girl accidentally creates fusion. I need the story to be genius inventor seeks strategic partners to revolutionize global energy. I control the narrative by moving first. My fingers flew across the screen. I selected the first 3 VCs on the list, the ones with the deepest pockets and the most aggressive reputations. I created a group chat. Thank you for your interest, I typed. I will be holding a series of private demonstrations for select investors tomorrow morning here at the lab. I have 3 slots available, 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and 10 a.m. The initial investment round is for $10 million for a 20% stake in the foundational patent. Let me know which time works for you. First come, first served. I hit send, the message landing like a gauntlet thrown down. No time for sentiment, no time for fear. My parents had made their choice, and now I was making mine. I was choosing the future, even if I had to face it alone. The replies came almost instantly. 8 a.m. confirmed. Helios. We'll take 9 a.m. Odyssey. 10 a.m. We're on our way. Quantum Leap. I closed the phone. The meetings were set. The war had begun. The stale smell of lukewarm pizza and disinfectant hung in the air of the Riverside Prep cafeteria, a surreal backdrop for the moment that would define my financial independence. I sat at one of the long Formica tables, my back to the wall, my phone propped up on a carton of milk, live streaming to an audience that now numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Across from me sat a man in a ruthlessly sharp suit, Mr. Thorne from Helios Ventures, and beside me was Miss Davis, the sharpest lawyer in the city, whom I'd retained yesterday. Between us lay a contract. Professor Williams stood a few feet away, a silent, supportive sentinel. So, just to reiterate for everyone watching, I said, looking into my phone's camera, Helios Ventures is providing an initial seed grant of $2.3 million for the establishment of a new research entity, which I will be directing. Mr. Thorne smiled, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the deal. It's the smartest money we'll ever spend, Maya. This grant is to secure the necessary lab equipment and personnel to move the prototype to its next phase. It's just the beginning. The contract stipulates that I retain full 51% controlling interest in all intellectual property rights for the foundational patents. I continued, my voice steady. The grant is an educational and research agreement, structured to be legally binding for a minor under California statute. I looked at Miss Davis, who nodded crisply. It's ironclad. With a flourish, I took the offered pen. The tip hovered over the signature line, the culmination of a whirlwind 24 hours of brutal negotiations. And as the pen touched the paper, the main doors of the cafeteria burst open. Maya! My father's voice boomed across the cavernous room, a sound raw with fury and desperation. He and my mother stormed towards my table, looking wildly out of place. They were still in the clothes they'd flown in, wrinkled and smelling of airport anxiety. Dad was wearing a gaudy jacket emblazoned with cheer nationals on the back. They looked like ghosts from a life I had already shed. You're a little late, I said calmly, not looking up as I finished my signature with a flourish. I was just signing away my future, or rather, signing it back to myself. Stop this, he yelled, reaching for the papers. Mr. Thorne's hand shot out, stopping him. I wouldn't touch that, the venture capitalist said, his voice dangerously low. That is now a legally binding multi-million-dollar contract. My dad ignored him, his wild eyes fixed on me. You're 17, you can't sign contracts. This is absurd. Miss Davis spoke up, her tone as sharp and cold as a scalpel. Actually, she said, adjusting her glasses, California Educational Code Section 6711 allows a minor to enter into a binding contract for the purposes of educational grants and loans. With court approval, which, given the circumstances of financial malfeasance regarding her trust fund, we expect to receive on an expedited basis. You, on the other hand, could be facing felony embezzlement charges. Dad recoiled as if he'd been struck. My mother rushed forward, her face a mask of pleading tears. Maya, please, she begged, her voice cracking. Please, honey, we can fix this. Let these people go. We can go home and we can talk it all through. We can be a family again. The sheer, unadulterated gall of her words struck me. I finally looked up from the contract, my gaze meeting hers. Fix this? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. You had 18 years to fix this. You had a science fair last night. You had a regional decathlon last month. You had 17 birthdays. The time for fixing this is over. The time for consequences has begun. We love you, she cried, a desperate last-ditch appeal. We love you and Chloe both equally. I almost laughed. The lie was so practiced, so worn out from overuse. Equally, I countered, the word dripping with ice. Did you give Chloe equal time, or did you go to every single one of her competitions? Did you divert my college fund equally? Did you make me equally visible, or just equally invisible? Her face crumpled, the tears now flowing freely. The raw desperation finally broke through the years of carefully constructed lies. You don't understand, she sobbed, her voice rising hysterically, every word broadcast to my silent, watching audience. Chloe needed us more. After everything with her father, we had to make her feel secure. We had to make her feel chosen. We promised her she was the only one who really mattered. There it was, the family's most guarded secret, the one I had only ever suspected, now laid bare and confessed on a live stream. It wasn't just neglect, it was a conscious, deliberate choice, a promise made at my expense. They hadn't just forgotten me. They had sacrificed me on the altar of their guilt over Chloe's past. The air rushed out of my lungs, the confirmation a quiet, devastating explosion in my chest. The cafeteria, the contract, the people around me, it all faded into a dull, humming background. At that exact moment, a notification lit up my phone's screen. The vibration against the milk carton was the only thing that felt real. My eyes focused on the text. It was an email. The subject line read, "Submission Confirmation, a practical approach to contained plasma stability in compact fusion reactors." The sender was the Journal of Nuclear Physics. My focus snapped back. I looked from my phone to my weeping mother and my stunned, defeated father. The juxtaposition was poetic. The very moment they confessed to erasing me, the most respected scientific journal in my field was confirming my existence. I stood up, my chair scraping against the linoleum. The live stream was still running. I held up my phone for the camera to see the email. While my parents were promising my sister she was the only daughter who mattered, I announced, my voice clear and ringing with a terrible finality. The international scientific community was confirming my work. While they were actively making me invisible, my research was preparing to make its debut on the world stage. It seems we had different definitions of what matters. My parents stared, horrified, finally understanding the depth of the pit they had dug for themselves. They had not only confessed, but they had confessed to the world. I ignored their stricken faces and addressed my audience one last time. The Helios grant is only the first step. For those who want the full story and to hear about the future of this technology, I will be holding a press conference. I paused, letting the weight of my next words sink in. It will be held in the main auditorium here at Riverside Prep, at 6 p.m. sharp. I glanced at the clock on the wall. That's in 2 hours. I'll see you there. The Riverside Prep auditorium was unrecognizable. The familiar dusty stage where I had once clutched a lonely science fair trophy was now a blaze of television lights. A forest of microphones and cameras was aimed at the simple podium where I stood. Every major news network had a van parked outside. The live stream of my fusion experiment, followed by the public crumbling of my family's facade, had created a media firestorm. Backstage, Professor Williams had paced nervously, while Miss Davis, my lawyer, had given me a final steadying nod before handing me a thick manila envelope. Now, facing the glare, I felt a strange and absolute calm. This was just another variable to be controlled. I cleared my throat and the room fell silent. "Good evening," I began, my voice amplified through the powerful sound system. "My name is Maya Chen. 48 hours ago, in the lab down the hall, I initiated the first ever self-sustaining net positive energy reaction from a compact fusion device. The technology I developed has the potential to solve the global energy crisis and fundamentally change our world. To that end, I have secured initial funding from Helios Ventures to form a new company, which I will lead, to bring this technology to the public." The room erupted in a cacophony of camera shutters. I let the noise wash over me before continuing, outlining the science in clear, concise terms, laying the groundwork for a future built on truth and empirical data. It was then, of course, that the heavy doors at the back of the auditorium banged open. All heads turned. Framed in the doorway, panting as if they'd run from the airport, were my parents. They were 20 minutes late, and they were still wearing Chloe's bright blue and gold cheerleading team jackets, a garish and pathetic display of their priorities. The sea of reporters parted for them as they marched down the center aisle, their faces thunderous. The cameras, sensing a far more dramatic story than plasma physics, swiveled in unison to track their approach. "Maya, sweetie, this is ridiculous!" My mother's voice, sharp with indignation, cut through the tense silence. She wasn't using a microphone, but her anger carried. The reporters surged, a frenzy of shouted questions. I held up a hand, and the room quieted slightly. I gave my mother a cool, analytical look and leaned into the microphone. "It seems my parents, Patricia and Thomas Chen, have arrived. I wasn't aware this would be an interactive presentation, but I'm happy to take questions from the audience." The reporters laughed, a sharp, cynical sound. My father jabbed a finger toward the stage. "Don't you play games with us, young lady. You have made a mockery of this family. You end this circus right now." I tilted my head. "A mockery?" I asked, my voice dangerously polite. "Is it ridiculous that I solved sustainable fusion at 17? Is that the embarrassing family secret you're so intent on hiding?" "We never said your achievements don't matter," my mother shot back, stepping forward. Her voice was pitched to sound wounded, the long-suffering matriarch. It was a role she played well, but the stage lights were harsh and unforgiving. No, you never said it, I agreed, letting the words echo in the silent auditorium. You just showed it. You said it every time you missed a parent-teacher conference because Chloe had practice. You said it with every empty chair at every award ceremony for the last 17 years. You said it 2 nights ago when you chose to fly across the country to watch a cheerleading competition instead of seeing the project that will literally redefine modern science. You said it when you chose to wear those jackets here tonight. I gestured to their matching garish attire. You have always, always said it. You just never had the courage to use your words. The accusation hung in the air, thick and undeniable. My mother's face paled, her righteous anger faltering. This wasn't a private argument in our living room. This was a public dissection, and my words were the scalpel. That's not fair, she insisted, her voice trembling. We were trying to balance. Balance? I laughed, a sharp, mirthless sound that the microphone amplified into a weapon. Was it balance when you embezzled my $250,000 college fund to pay for her coaches and costumes? We're not talking about a scheduling conflict, Mom. We're talking about a systematic 17-year campaign of erasure. A campaign you confessed to yesterday on a live stream that was viewed by 3 million people. Panic flashed in their eyes. They were losing, and they knew it. In a last, desperate gamble, my mother played the only card she had left. But Chloe needs us more, she cried, her voice cracking with a genuine selfish desperation. She's more sensitive than you are. You've always been so strong, so independent. She needed the support. And there it was, the final nail. The entire room went dead silent, save for the furious clicking of cameras. I let her words hang in the air for a long, pregnant moment, ensuring every microphone, every recording device, every single person in the room and watching at home had absorbed the full impact. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper that was somehow more powerful than a shout. Thank you, I said. Did everyone get that? Did you just admit on camera to a room full of the international press that you knowingly and intentionally prioritize one daughter over the other because she needs you more? My father's face went ashen. My mother clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror at what she had done. That's not... We didn't mean... She stammered, looking wildly at my father for help, but he was speechless. I straightened up, my expression unreadable. Thank you for finally being honest, I said, the words a clean, final cut. It's all I ever wanted. The auditorium exploded into chaos. Reporters were shouting, their camera flashes creating a violent, blinding strobe effect. My parents were frozen, trapped in the Klieg lights of their own making, their carefully constructed world shattered around them. In the midst of the pandemonium, I remained perfectly still. I gave a subtle nod to Miss Davis, who walked calmly from the wings and handed me the manila envelope. I opened the clasp and drew out the stack of papers. The emancipation documents, signed by me, notarized by Miss Davis, and already filed with the court that morning. I held them up for the cameras to see, then laid them flat on the podium. I slid them across the polished wood, pushing them toward the edge of the stage. They fluttered down and landed at my parents' feet. These are for you, I announced, my voice cutting through the din. My lawyer will be in touch to arrange for the transfer of my personal effects. As of an hour ago, when the judge signed the emergency order, our legal relationship is terminated. The flashes intensified, a wall of blinding white light. My parents didn't even look at the papers. They just stared at me, their faces a ruin of shock and utter defeat. They were being swarmed, reporters shoving microphones in their faces, but I didn't watch. As I turned away from the wreckage of my old life and looked out into the crowd. I saw Professor Williams in the third row, his face glowing with a fierce, paternal pride. A few seats down, Mr. Thorne from Helios Ventures was on his phone, a grim smile on his face as he protected his new asset. I saw the faces of the Stanford recruiters, of other scientists who had flown in when they heard the news. The custody battle was over before it had even begun. But my real family, a family forged not in blood and lies, but in the shared, relentless pursuit of truth, was just beginning to assemble. I turned back to the podium, ignoring my parents completely. Now, I said to the press, my voice steady and clear. If there are no further interruptions, I'd like to get back to the future. I left them there, frozen in the white-hot glare of the cameras, two relics of a past I had just finished excavating and discarding. I didn't watch as security guards politely but firmly escorted them from the auditorium. I didn't listen to the cacophony of questions they were undoubtedly asked as they were ushered away. Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. I turned back to the press, and for the next hour, I answered questions. Not about my emancipation, not about the pathetic drama they had witnessed, but about the hard science of my discovery. I talked about magnetic confinement, about plasma stability, about a future where energy was clean, cheap, and abundant. I spoke with the passion and precision I had once reserved for my notebooks, and I felt a sense of belonging I had never known. My gaze drifted over the front rows of reporters and landed on Professor Williams. He wasn't looking at me with the shock of the past 2 days, but with a deep, quiet pride, the look of a mentor who sees his student surpass him and knows he has done his job well. Beside him, Miss Davis was already fielding calls, a fierce protector of the new enterprise we had just announced. Farther back, Mr. Thorne was watching with the satisfied look of a man who knew he'd just made the deal of a lifetime. These people weren't bound to me by blood or obligation. They were bound by a shared belief in what was possible, in the power of a single, world-changing idea. In that moment, surrounded by the flashing lights and the promise of an unwritten future, I finally understood a fundamental truth. Some families are born from biology, a lottery of shared genetics, but the ones that truly matter, the ones that sustain you, are earned through the shared pursuit of truth. 5 years later, the silence in my parents' living room was broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of a television broadcast from halfway across the world. The room was a shrine to a life that had failed to launch. Trophies from Chloe's cheerleading days, tarnished and dusty, crowded the mantelpiece. Her brief attempt at community college had ended in academic probation, and she now worked as a receptionist at a local gym. My father, grayer and heavier, sat slumped in his recliner, his eyes fixed on the screen. My mother sat ramrod straight on the sofa, her hands clenched in her lap, her face a carefully blank mask that couldn't quite hide the permanent lines of disappointment etched around her mouth. On the television, a man with a regal sash was placing a heavy gold medal around the neck of a young woman. Their daughter. She looks so, my mother began, her voice a dry whisper. Confident. She looks like a stranger, my father grunted, taking a long swallow of his beer. They watched as the camera zoomed in on my face. I was smiling, a genuine, relaxed smile they hadn't seen since I was a small child. My eyes scanned the audience, and for a terrifying second, my mother felt as though I was looking right at them, through the screen, through the years, and seeing every last one of their failures. They watched as my gaze settled on someone in the front row, a look of profound warmth and affection filling my face. The camera panned briefly to follow my line of sight, catching a beaming Professor Williams, who gave a proud, fatherly nod. The screen cut back to me at the podium. My parents watched finally, and for the first time, they began to understand the sheer galactic scale of what they had lost. The weight of the medal around my neck was real, solid, earned. It was heavier than I had imagined in my dreams and my memories. The applause from the assembled intellect and royalty of the world was a physical force, a wave of recognition that washed over me, cleansing the last remnants of my past. I adjusted the Nobel Prize, the blue ribbon soft against my skin, and my eyes found Professor Williams. He was crying, unabashedly, his face a perfect picture of joy. He was the one who had stayed after school to debate my theories, who had trusted me with the keys to the lab, who had stood by me when I declared war on my own life. He was my family. The applause began to subside, the expectation settling over the grand concert hall. I took a deep breath, stepping to the podium that had haunted my memories and now stood as a testament to my reality. I looked out at the world, at the cameras that would broadcast my image into a quiet living room thousands of miles away. And then I began my speech. Science, I said, my voice clear and steady, doesn't play favorites.